Yo, what up guys, it's Renan and I am back to give some tips on how to make a playlist that I talked about in my last video. Also, I hope my last video didn't come across as bashing aim trainers as a whole. I think the best way to train is not what's recommended usually in things like Reddit or maybe aim training discords. In fact, I think the best way to do it is to make your own playlist, which is why I made this video right here. And even if you train with Voltaic or the RevoSect benchmarks, you will be improving as a whole, but just not as efficiently as I think you can for actual video games. Anyways, let's get right into the video and start straight from scratch as if you guys are newbies to aim training. And one of the first questions you're going to want to ask yourself is, what type of scenarios do you want in your playlist? There's a few categories. If you're new, you will want easy scenarios to build up to the hard ones. And then you also have scenarios that are close to in-game situations, like movement included scenarios. And then you have stationary scenarios like you would have in the normal Voltaic benchmarks. But in my opinion, those should be a lot harder for the tracking and flicking that you will have in an actual game, because by not moving, the scenario is going to be easier by default. And you also want to think about different styles of aim, which you'll be familiar with if you've done the Voltaic benchmarks. So categories like smoothness, reactive tracking, and flicking, and even target switching scenarios, in which you change the amount of each scenario depending on their use for your game. So if you're playing Valorant, for example, maybe you want more flicking scenarios. And if you play a game like Apex or Overwatch, maybe you're going to want more tracking scenarios. And lastly, there is one other category of scenarios that I like, which are the niche scenarios, which are going to be things like vertical tracking, which are kind of harder to find, or peeking scenarios if you play a game like Valorant, where you peek around a corner and shoot a bot. And now let's actually go make a playlist from scratch. And I think the best way to do it is to start with a basic playlist that you can find on the main page of Kovaak's. You might find one that is quite good, actually baseline, but almost certainly there are going to be scenarios you may not want in there depending on if you need to do them. Maybe you're already good in this category, or you can simply get better scenarios than what are actually in the playlist already. So let's take Apex and start with one of the recommended Kovaak's routines on the front page. We want to make sure that the routines are reflective of what's actually going to be in the game, so we may not want very many stationary scenarios for Apex. Or if you have stationary scenarios, you're going to want to make sure they're a bit harder than actual in-game tracking. Otherwise, you may not get as much use out of these stationary scenarios. All right, let's go ahead and jump straight into Kovaak's here. And the first thing you're going to want to do is find a playlist to kind of build off of. And there are pretty good playlists by default. If you come to the online playlist tab, you can see we have a few Apex routines that we can pick out from. And there's even a split gate routine in here. So if you play any type of game, you're probably going to find a good default playlist for your game. So let's go ahead and start with one that I actually found online called the Pure G Apex routine, which is often recommended, and you can probably Google it or copy this code right here that I highlighted, and you can download it and you can start with me here. The first thing you're going to want to do is kind of go through each routine and kind of see if it is a good match for the game that you're playing. When you go through, you want it to either be more difficult than the actual game mechanics. So if you're doing a stationary tracking scenario, you're going to want it to be pretty hard. Like if you do the LDDH fixed, this one is going to be pretty difficult compared to like in-game tracking. And this would be a good stationary playlist that I personally would keep in there. And then you're also going to have things like B180 or popcorn scenarios, which are good in certain scenarios for a game like Apex. So if somebody's jumping up a building, or if somebody's octane padding, then this scenario might actually be pretty good for you. I think a good rule of thumb is if the routine is kind of like on the top end, if you go to the top, although a lot of people have a pretty good accuracy in this one, but say you go to LDDH, look at the top accuracy is 33%, 34% roughly, then this would be a good stationary scenario because it's so difficult that even the best of the best have a hard time tracking, and the percentage of like their accuracy is going to be really low. So that's kind of what I'd be looking for in a stationary scenario. And we have things like smooth sphere. That is a hard word for me to say, but we have this routine right here, right? That we can do, and I personally like this one. It's kind of similar to smooth thin strafe, where it kind of forces you to be really smooth and accurate on a small target, And this is a routine that I would actually keep in here just because I think smoothness is a very big part of being a good tracker. So, all right. And then we have, again, another good one. I do like this one. I think the target is a little bit big, and it could be harder, but I think this would be a good close fast strafing type scenario. Again, we have popcorn tracking, which again, I think is okay. We don't want too many of those in here, but as you can see, it would again be good for tracking people jumping off a building or octane padding. We're gonna keep that one. And another smoothness routine, kind of redundant with the other one, but I do like this one as well. I think it is good to have a lot of smoothness routines if you want to be good at tracking video games. And a verticality one, this one I would personally find a better version of, one that relies on a little bit faster strafing, because I honestly think while the verticality aspect of it is pretty good, I think it is a little bit slow. So what we can do here is, what was that one called? That one was called High Ground Pure. So if we go down here, we can probably Google High Ground Pure and then find other variations of it. And we can try to see if maybe we can add a different one and see if that one's a little bit better. I mean, this one actually seems like pretty much the exact same thing. Yeah, they're all the same. Who the heck? All right, one last one. And this is kind of what I do when I'm making my own playlist. This one would be okay. A little bit weird, but actually I would probably prefer this one than the other one because it is a little bit tinier, strafes a little bit more, and it'd be good shooting people off of a building. This is actually a great one that I would add. So this one right here, we just go over, add to our Pure G playlist, save it. And personally, I'm gonna take off this High Ground Pure one because I don't really like it. And then there's also another thing you could do is you could go into the online playlist tab and look at vertical, type in vertical, and you can try to find variations of other playlists. Oh my goodness. Hopefully with the power of editing, I'll be able to skip around so you're not going to be watching me for 5 minutes look for different things. But I do know that if you go to another playlist like the default Apex one, there is a pretty good one here that I would add. This one actually I like a lot because you have to move, it strafes a bit, and it's a humanoid robot, meaning that it's not pill shaped and is more reflective of actual in-game character models. So I personally like this one way more than the other one because it's more realistic to how you're actually going to deal with the bots in the actual game. So strafes and jumps, let's go ahead and look that one up in the playlist tab and add that one to our Pure G one because I actually like that one a lot more. Go ahead and add that to the Pure G, and we kicked out the other one. Perfect. And then the one thing I am going to try to add a lot more in this is a lot of movement routines. We don't want to deal with a lot of ones that are too stationary because it can be kind of counterproductive in my opinion. We have this one too. And this one again is another hard one where the percentage, like the accuracy, is really low. So this would be another good one that I actually like because of how difficult it is. I don't really like this one. I think the VSS ones are ones that change their speed as it goes along. So this bot will get faster and slower, and it kind of forces you to adapt your tracking speed to the bot, and it's not going one speed, meaning you can't like memorize the pace of the bot. You have to kind of actually track it. And I do think that's better, but again, I would want one that's moving because of how easy it is compared to the other one. And I don't know if we can find one, or here we go. We can actually look up the same bot, but is actually thinner, which might be a little bit better for what we're looking for. Yeah, this one would be a lot better in my opinion because of how much tinier it is. And now I'm talking and I'm not really trying to track, but you get the idea. Don't judge me too much. I think this one would be a better version of that one because it's more difficult. And that's usually better. I don't want to be doing one that's too easy. And now these are kind of flicking scenarios, and I won't go over it too much here, but I would probably do the Voltaic versions of this rather than do the one wall wide target variations. I will add the Voltaic Season 4 ones. The VT Ground Varied Advance is actually a good routine that I would add into my Apex playlist, as well as maybe these two here, the one wall 3 target small and the multi-click. If I'm looking to do flicking scenarios, I think they're pretty good. and I would take out the ones that are in this playlist and maybe re-add a different wide wall, the WW means wide wall variation. This is another routine which I don't really know the purpose of. It's a bit too easy. Maybe if I would go to 3D switching here and look up a harder version of it, because I'm kind of questioning why it would be so easy in comparison. This is an interesting one. What the heck? This would be one maybe I would pick in order to... This is actually a pretty good one. I would add this one into the playlist because I like the verticality aspect of it. And it is pretty difficult, and it would be good for, say, tracking tap strafing, wall jumping, race, jumping onto your screen and learning to track them. You know, this would actually be one that I would add. And I don't want to make this video too much longer, but I hope this did kind of cover my strategy for creating a playlist using another base playlist and removing and adding to it to add things that I like. And you can see an example here. This one I believe started as the Pith Valorant playlist, which I ended up changing pretty much completely except for a few things and that he had originally, and I added a bunch of my own ones that I either wanted to practice or I thought would be good for Valorant. So hopefully this helped you come up with a way to make your own playlist that either suits your needs for what you're weak at in the game, or at least helped you create the best possible video game playlist that you can. But anyways, guys, that is going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching.